They say there's nothing more comforting than a rainy night, but what if that rain brought something sinister with it? What if the shadows outside your window held more than just darkness? Tonight, we explore stories that will make you rethink your love for rainy nights, because in these tales, the isolation becomes a breeding ground for unspeakable horrors. And if you think you're brave, like this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any stories in the future. You're gonna give me $100 to sit inside this cardboard box for 2 minutes? The story is by you, Sunhead Prime. You're gonna give me $100 to sit inside this cardboard box for 2 minutes? I asked, feeling the booze slosh around my brain. It's that simple, the street performer said with a cocksure grin. You last 2 minutes inside the box, you get $100. What if I don't make it 2 minutes? You don't get $100. What's inside the box? The street performer opened the top of the large refrigerator box, and, true to his word, it was empty. So what's the catch? My friend Paul said. There's always a catch. No catch. You go in of your own free will. You get out of your own free will. You put 2 minutes between those moments, you get $100. Let me see the money, I said. The street performer didn't look like he had a spare Franklin to part with. He wore a stained, threadbare suit with patches on the elbows and tearing at the sleeves. Atop his head was a busted top hat that looked like it had survived since the Great Depression. His feet were covered in mismatched, filthy docksiders that looked like they'd been hauled up from some mucky swamp. That said, the street performer pulled a crisp and clean $100 bill from under his hat. I feel like if I go in, you're gonna kick the box, or pour old soup on me, or some other stupid shit for one of those dumbass TikTok pranks. Old soup? I asked, chuckling. Paul laughed. I don't know, man. Old-ass clam chowder or something. The street performer shook his head. No, sir. I'm not a fan of chowder or pranks, and I don't have any idea what a TikTok is. I'm just an honest man looking to give away $100 to the bravest and boldest among you. That's definitely not you, Paul, I said, laughing. Fuck off, bro, Paul said. You gonna do it? I asked. Why don't you do it? He shot back. Not bold enough? No, not really. Plus, if I sit down on the ground, I may not be able to get back up. I think I shouldn't have had that last drink. I'm gonna call that Uber. Your name's Paul, correct? The street performer asked my friend. Yeah. Paul, let me ask you this. Could you use $100? Hell yeah. Especially after what I spent tonight. Big, brave man like you couldn't be afraid of a simple cardboard box? Fuck no, I'm not. Do you have 2 minutes to spare? How long until the Uber gets here? Paul asked me. 5 minutes, I said, give or take. Paul looked at the box and back to the street performer before glancing at me. What do you think? Is it worth it? Man, I don't know. I didn't. The alcohol was not only on top of me, but was beating my temples with rock hammers. I mean, the whole thing is fucking weird, but he hasn't explained a downside. I haven't informed you of any downsides because there isn't one, the street performer said with a wink. This guerrilla marketing for a box company, or do you work for Frigidaire? I asked. No, sir, I work for me, myself, and I, the street performer said. Nobody likes having a boss, am I right? Especially if you knew my boss, I said. He makes Attila the Hun look like Daffy Duck. Fuck it, man, Paul said suddenly. I'll do it. Wonderful, the street performer said. Only, Paul added, looking at me, if we can go to the titty bar after I get out. Bro, I am beat, I said, yawning. I don't have the energy. You don't have enough energy to look at boobs? No, I said, surprising myself. I might pass out in the Uber. If you're gonna throw up in the alley, Paul said. They charge extra if they have to clean up any bodily fluids. Maybe I'll puke in the box before you get in. Please don't vomit inside the box, the street performer said. It's one of a kind. These things come off an assembly line, Paul said. Hardly one of a kind. I glanced at my phone, let my vision refocus, and noticed the Uber's arrival time. You got 3 minutes, dude. You going in or not? Fuck it. Let's do it. Who keeps time? Time keeps itself. However, I have a pocket watch to assist us, the street performer said, pulling out a beat-up brass pocket watch from inside his suit jacket. Climb in now. I'll count you down. Paul opened the top flaps and placed one foot inside. He was unsteady on his drunk legs, and I started laughing at his teetering. He flipped me off, steadied himself, and placed the second leg inside. He sat down, shot me a shit-eating grin, and said, I want to go to Golden Apples after. That girl Janine is there this weekend. She's not into you, I said. Yet, he said with a smile before grabbing the flaps and closing himself in the box. Your time starts in 3, 2, 1, the street performer said, watching the second hand on his watch spin past 12. Go. Paul sat there for a minute before he started chuckling. I couldn't help but join in. What even was this? In a million years, I'd never be able to guess that this is where the night would end, inside a cardboard box. You start by having a few too many cheap domestics during a ball game and end up probably being hustled by an unhoused guy in a top hat. This is so fucking stupid, I said, barely holding back laughter. They said the same thing about the dog launched into space. Hey, Laika, how dark is it up there? I asked. Not very, Paul said, his voice muffled by the cardboard. He started a giggle fit again before adding, I feel like a dumbass. If the shoe fits, I said. The box suddenly jostled violently. It went still for a beat before rocking back and forth again. From inside the box, I could hear Paul moving and adjusting. Bro, stop moving, I said. I'm not doing that, he said. 30 seconds, the street performer yelled out. Wait a second. It just got dark. Really dark. You can't see the neon light from the bar? No, he said, his voice unsure. Wait, there's some kind of white light off in the distance. The distance? I asked, confused. You're inside a box. The farthest distance is a foot away. Hey, Mr. Top Hat, is there a screen hidden in here? Like a TV screen or something? The street performer ignored him. What's going on? I asked. There's something approaching the box. Yeah, the Uber, I said with a drunken laugh. No, like there is someone walking toward the inside of the box, Paul said. It looks like a person, but that doesn't make any sense. His voice went from playful drunk to concerned drunk. He was sloshed, but a small part of his brain was still on guard. It told him there was danger around him, but it didn't make any sense, as he was sitting inside a cardboard box on the sidewalk of an empty street. 45 seconds. Paul, stop fucking around. Bro, I'm serious, he said. Some guy, I think it's a guy, anyway, is walking toward me. Wait, oh shit. There are 2, no, 3, 4. I'm surrounded by shadow figures. Shadow figures? I asked. They look like people, but different. You fucking with me? There aren't any features that I can see. They look like silhouettes. Dude, stop. The joke's not funny anymore. Get out, huh? The Uber is almost here anyway. Shh, he hissed. I think they can hear your voice. I turned to the street performer. What's going on here? What's the gag? He ignored me. His eyes stayed trained on the pocket watch's quickly rotating second hand. 1 minute, halfway there, he yelled. I can hear them speaking. It's faint, but what? It doesn't sound like any language I've ever heard. Paul, enough's enough. Come on out, man. Our ride is turning down the street. Oh, fuck. I think they saw me, he said, his voice quivering. Who's they? These shadow figures. Oh, fuck, he said, fear lacing his words. I heard him start kicking the side of the box from the inside. The cardboard bent with each kick but never broke. Get moving, I said. I'm trying to run, but my body isn't moving. Dude, you're kicking the box, I said. That's not me. My body is frozen and they're coming. Holy shit. Get out of the box, Paul. 1 minute, 30 seconds, the street performer yelled. Best time of the night? One of them is coming for me, Paul said in a panic. Oh God, they have eyes, but not like ours. His eyes. I can see. Paul trailed off. You can see what? Everything, he said. They're showing me everything. 1 minute 40. The money is as good as yours, stranger. There's fire. It's everywhere. The ground is sizzling. I can feel the heat. It's burning me through my pants. Ah, fuck. What is this? Get out of the box now, Paul. The other three are closing in. Their eyes are glowing white. I can see the ends of the earth, the end of the sky, the end of it all. The fires, they burn. Oh God, they burn! Then Paul started screaming. Not, I stubbed my toe screams, but I'm being murdered, and the only person who will ever hear this is my killer screams. Open the box, I yelled at the street performer. Right fucking now. But he didn't move an inch. He kept his eyes trained on his watch. 10 seconds remaining, the street performer yelled. 10. I leaned over and tried to rip open the flaps on top of the box, but they weren't moving. They felt like 1,000 pounds, and I couldn't budge them. I slammed my hand down on the cardboard, and it felt like I had just hit concrete. My hand throbbed, but I tried again, to rip the box open to no avail. Push up, Paul, I screamed at the top of the box. Listen to my voice, and come for it. 9, 8, 7. Why are you all showing me this? Paul said through sobs. I don't want to watch them all die. Paul, sit up. Come on, man, sit up. 654. The box was jostling back and forth, being shaken by unseen forces. It jumped an inch off the ground and rocked around like bored kids beat it with bats. I'm watching them tear me apart, Paul said with a whimper. Whoa, I'm above them now. I'm being pulled away, but I can see my body. There's so much blood, so much fire. Get out. What's pulling me into the air? Paul asked, his voice sounding distant. 3. Paul, I'm coming. I threw my whole body at the box, trying to knock it on its side. I hoped to see Paul come tumbling out. But when I hit the cardboard, it didn't move an inch. It clanged like it was made from pure steel. I braced myself on the ground and kicked the side of the box with all my might, and instantly felt a lightning bolt of pain rush my leg up and spine. There was nothing I could do. 2. I'm so high. I can see it. I can see the... Oh my God. No, it can't be. No! Paul screamed, and it sounded like it was falling now. Oh shit. The ground. It's opening. From the sidewalk, I looked up at the street performer with hate in my eyes and yelled, Let him go, you fuck. Open the box. I'm falling through the world. How? Oh no. Oh God. Oh God. Please let me go. 1. And time, the street performer yelled, raising his hands in victory. The box went still. Paul. You won, the street performer exclaimed triumphantly. The first of the night. He calmly tucked his pocket watch back into his jacket pocket. He replaced it with a small dollar store confetti popper. He gently yanked the string of the popper and blasted bits of colorful paper and glitter into the air. It landed all around me. I lunged at the box and tried to rip open the top again. This time, the flaps moved as easily as expected. But when I pulled them back, Paul wasn't inside. Not a trace of him. The only thing I found was a crisp, new $100 bill. Paul? Paul? What the fuck? Where are you? He's left the box, the street performer said. His 2 minutes were up. I leaped onto my feet, ready to beat the street performer to a pulp. But when I glanced at where he had been standing, he was gone. I hadn't heard him run away or catch a cab or anything. Like Paul, there was no trace of him. It was like he'd never been there. From behind me, I heard a car downshift and come to a stop on the curb. There was the familiar whine of an electric window being rolled down, followed by a monotonous voice calling out my name. My Uber had arrived. I looked to where the box was, and it was gone too. All that was left was the $100 bill. You still want your ride? My driver said. Did you see anyone with me? No, he said. There wasn't a man in a busted top hat and a large refrigerator box standing here as you came down the street. I think you made a good decision calling an Uber, my driver deadpanned, adding, If you puke in my car, there is a cleaning fee. So, if you're gonna yak, just do it now, huh? I felt my legs go weak. I didn't know what to do. My friend was gone, and the man who sent him away had vanished. I didn't even know what to say to the police. My friend climbed into a cardboard box and disappeared. No, I'm not drunk. Anymore. You coming or what? This is my busy time. I looked down at the $100 bill, and something caught my eye. Instead of Benjamin Franklin's face staring back at me, someone had scrawled a note. I picked up the note and held it close to my face. I'd know that handwriting anywhere. It was Paul's. The note read, "I've seen the end. You don't make it." "Buddy, you coming?" my driver asked. "Yeah," I said. I'm coming." That was several hours ago. I've been sitting at my kitchen table, staring at the $100 bill. I'm not sure what to do. My mind is mush, and it has nothing to do with the alcohol. I'm at a crossroads and don't know where to go. I don't know what to say to Paul's family. How do I even begin to explain this? I keep thinking I'm having a nightmare as I sleep one off, but I'm not. I'm sitting stock still in my kitchen as the first rays of the sun turn the black sky purple. There's a vice around my heart, a profound loss for my friend, and fear for the message he left behind. I've seen the end. You don't make it. You try falling asleep after this. I let my son use the copier to print a picture of his face. I regret everything. This story is by you, Blair Daniels. I think we've all put our faces in copiers as kids. It was a fun thing to do, especially when we didn't have modern luxuries like iPads or YouTube. So yesterday afternoon, when my kid was bored as heck, I decided to give it a try with him. Yeah, it was a waste of ink, but honestly, it was worth it. If it pried my kid away from Minecraft speedruns and Hot Wheels unboxing videos, I switched it to black and white ink only and started the fun. We copied his hands a few times. He laughed with glee. "Do your face now," I told him. He scrunched his lips up like an exaggerated duck face and stuck his face against the glass. I lowered the lid on his head, which was very light. "Close your eyes. The light's bright," I told him, as the band of white light began sliding across the glass, scanning his face. Then came the ch-ch-ch of the page printing. But when he grabbed the page, my heart sank. In the picture, his eyes were open. He wasn't doing the duck face either. "Did you open your eyes?" I asked him. He shook his head. I stared down at the picture. His face pressed up against the glass, his cheeks and forehead pushed flat. In the high contrast, his medium brown eyes looked pure black. "Again! Again!" Matthew chanted, lifting the lid and sticking his head in. I hesitated. Then I lowered the lid and pressed copy. Ch-ch-ch. The paper came out inch by inch. I saw Matthew's ear, then his cheek, his eye, wide open, and then his mouth. His mouth stretched out into a gaping O, as if he were screaming. I grabbed Matthew and pulled him back. The lid clattered shut. "But it's not done!" he protested. Ch-ch-ch. The rest of the page came out, although I could see the exact moment I'd pulled Matthew away. There was a line 3/4 of the way across his face, cutting off half his right eye and cheek, turning into a mess of warped gray lines. "Does this scare you?" I asked. "No. I think we should play with something else for a while," I said. "But I want to do this." I was finally able to pull him away from it and give him something else to do. But even after he was in bed that night, something disturbed me. While the copies were being made, I could see his face under the lid. The second time, I'd stared at his face the entire time to make sure he didn't open his eyes. He didn't. So why did the picture show his eyes open? I told my husband about the whole thing after Matthew was asleep. "Hey, I remember doing that when I was a kid," Peter laughed. "I remember doing my butt, too. I got in a lot of trouble for that. But I swear he didn't open his eyes. He probably did for just a second. But if he'd only opened his eyes for a second." The scanner moved linearly, printing as it copied. If he'd opened his eyes just for a second, I'd expect to see one eye open and one eye closed, or even just half an eye open. When I'd pulled his head away, the rest of his head didn't copy. I explained this all to him, but he was unperturbed. "Let me try it," he said. What? Might just be a glitch or something. Peter walked over to the printer and turned it on, lifted the lid, and stuck his face in. The scanner light hummed to life, sliding across the glass. Ch-ch-ch. The page began to print. And then it happened. I noticed the page first, my husband's eye on the page, wide with fear, the corner of his mouth twisting down. And then he was pulled into the printer. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like something under the glass, next to the blinding strip of light, grabbed him by the head and yanked him through. I heard glass shatter. It happened so fast, by the time I lunged for him, only his feet were poking out. Then the lid clattered shut, and he was gone. "Peter?" I screamed. "Peter!" The rest of the page printed out. Peter's face, his final image, printed on the page. The left side of this face, perfectly clear, eye wide, mouth open, abject terror. The other side of his face, a twisted mess of warped lines, fading into black. My girlfriend said I'm not her type, and it's really messing with my head. This story is by U Orange PLR. I met Ashley at my mom's clinic. It was our parents that set us up. Otherwise, I don't know if she'd have dated a guy like me. Because my blood is O negative, universal donor, my mom forces me to make a donation every 12 weeks. I was sitting with the tube hooked into my arm when her childhood friend Sharon appeared. Sharon recently moved back to our town and heard her former bestie became a doctor. She introduced her daughter Ashley, who had stunning big blue eyes. Her skin looked even paler than mine. As a gamer, I'm basically allergic to fresh air, and she was dressed all in black. When she said hi, I squirmed on the bed, already sweating buckets. Luckily, Mom covered for me. "Don't mind Ryan. He's gonna be lightheaded for a while." As she removed the tube from my arm, Ashley threw a hand up over her mouth and spun away, repulsed. Her shoulder clipped a plastic container filled with cotton buds, which spilled their contents across the floor. "You can just leave those," Mom said as Ashley scooped them up. "It's okay. I'm totally OCD." While I sipped orange juice, our moms yacked away. I couldn't keep my eyes to myself, and every time I glanced at Ashley, she looked even more bored than I did, but I was too nervous to get a conversation going. Fortunately, my mom insisted they come over for food sometime. Ahead of the dinner party, I did push-ups in my room. Then I sat beside Ashley, who picked around her stir-fry. "Don't mind her," Sharon said, slightly embarrassed. "Ashley's not crazy about broccoli, or carrots, or honey, or garlic, or... well, she's just a fusspot in general." Underneath the table, my foot tapped so fast, and by dessert I'd barely strung 5 words together. Meanwhile, Mom and Sharon drained 2 bottles of wine. Since Sharon could barely stand upright, Mom said, "Why don't you stay in our guest room? Ryan can walk Ashley home. It'll get him out of that crypt for once." A lot of crime happened in our town, including stabbings and kidnappings. It wouldn't be safe to go by herself. Sharon practically shoved us out the door. "Don't look so scared, Ryan. Ashley doesn't bite." Ashley quietly walked beside me, arms folded. By the time we'd turned onto her street, all we'd talked about was the weather and how lame and transparent our mom's attempts to set us up were. Approaching her front door, I asked whether she liked video games. Her face lit up. "I play a ton of Terraria, although at the minute, I'm addicted to Risks of Rain 2. For the next 20 minutes, I wasn't nervous at all. I got so in my element I was brave enough to say, maybe we could play together sometime. "Sure." I ran straight home and bought every game she mentioned. It turned out online, me was way smoother than actual me. Over Discord, I kept making Ashley laugh, which helped melt away the nerves. Then I started complimenting her. It was like climbing in a warm bath and gradually putting more and more hot water in, so you adjust to the new temperature, except with flirting. One night, over Terraria, I said, "How's this? If I beat you in a PvP, you've got to let me take you on a date." I heard her smile through the headset. "Sure." My hands wouldn't quit shaking. At first it looked like she might smoke me, but I pulled out a win at the last second. I took Ashley for walks around our city so she could get familiar with the area. Because of all the reports of robberies and break-ins, we never stayed out too late, but I also didn't want to run into my school bullies, most of whom knew about a hot emo chick with an absolute dumper who moved to town and were going feral trying to find her. I avoided taking her out during the day, otherwise there'd have been a higher chance of us running into my bullies, but Ashley didn't seem to mind. After a handful of dates, we got a McDonald's, or at least I did. Ashley wasn't hungry. She watched me eat the chicken nuggets on a table in the park, next to the duck pond. Staring into those eyes, I swallowed a gulp and laced my fingers with hers across the table. She gave my hand a squeeze. Then slowly, I leaned forward and went in for a kiss. Ashley must have liked it because we kissed a bunch of times. Finally, I eased back and said, "I like you." "I like you too," she said, smiling. I thought I'd hit the jackpot. I wanted to take a picture of us and send it to every kid at my school, along with a few of the teachers who always called me nerd. I got so caught up in all the kissing, I didn't realize how late it was. I told Ashley we should hurry home. We left the park and followed a road that cut through a little woodland. Ashley didn't understand why I'd become so anxious. Up ahead, I could see the light of a petrol station. I figured we'd go inside and order an Uber to take us home, but crossing the bay, a car with its license plate covered cut in front of us and skidded to a stop, brakes screeching. 3 men stepped out, each wearing masks. Grabbing Ashley by the arm, I made a break for the station, but the men blocked our path. As I shielded her with my body, somebody punched me in the gut, which made me drop to my knees. Then 2 sets of powerful arms wrestled me into the trunk of the car. I thrashed around, spreading out so I wouldn't fit, until the barrel of a gun pressed against my forehead. "Get in, or we'll kill the fucking bitch." It was totally black in there. I could hear sounds of a struggle, followed by muffled voices from inside the cabin. The car started moving, taking corners so fast I got thrown from one side to the other. The air was warm, and getting warmer by the second, and I remember thinking I'd run out of oxygen before our attackers got the chance to kill me. As they drove, I caught fragments of their conversation. Take this next right. Do it in the forest. Nobody will see. They were gonna murder us. I pushed against the top of the trunk with my feet, but it refused to budge, and the car soon came to a stop. A door swung open, then male voices traveled around. The fact Ashley wasn't making a peep scared me worse than if she'd screamed, because at least then I'd have known she was alive and breathing. Suddenly, the men yelled over the top of each other. Then a gunshot went off. While the screams rang out, I attacked the roof with kicks and blows. At one point, my hand got sliced open by a piece of metal, but I didn't stop thrashing around until the world went quiet. "Ashley?" Footsteps slowly approached the car. I held my breath. The trunk rotated up, and then the cold air of the night rushed into the compartment. All I could make out was Ashley, silhouetted against the moonlight. I jumped up, grabbed her close. "What the fuck's going on? Are you hurt?" Blood was spread around her mouth and dripping from her chin. Shaking her head, she pointed at the side of the car. We were in a barren lot beside an abandoned multi-story car park. Between us and a wall of trees, 4 figures lay amongst the weeds. I went in for a closer look. The figures were skinny and shrunken and withered like Egyptian mummies. I could make out cartilage and exposed bone. "Don't freak out," Ashley said, approaching me from behind. I fell over and scrambled away in reverse. "I know this is crazy, but you don't have to be afraid, okay? I'm not going to hurt you. I don't normally go so overboard. But they were gonna slit our throats. Plus, I was overdue for a feed." As she reached down to help me, I threw up my cut hand between us, still dripping with blood, and whimpered, "Don't kill me." Ashley doubled over and started dry heaving. Between retches, she said, "Ryan, trust me, that isn't gonna happen. O negative tastes gross. Like, worse than diarrhea, no offense. But that's why you don't need to be afraid of me." Using the back of her sleeve, she wiped away most of the blood from around her mouth and then smiled at me, fangs bared. Because you're totally not my type. As a mortician, you must be on call 24/7. A late-night body retrieval for one family came with a disturbing set of requests. This story is by You Colorblindness. There is a list of jobs people find attractive, and being a funeral director is definitely not one of them. It goes without saying, you have to be able to separate your emotions from the job for several reasons. Grieving families often lash out, and you can be the target of their attacks. I wish that was all that happened a few nights ago. It might surprise you to learn that the odd hours I have to work don't bother me much, because most of the time it means I can do whatever I please. Unfortunately, this call came just as I was about to reach second base with my girlfriend Stacy. Can't you just ignore that damn thing for once? It wasn't the first time I'd had a call when I was busy trying to get laid, but I knew better than to let it go to voicemail. You know this job depends on my reputation. I can't afford a sour client, especially not in a small town like this. Stacy was already getting dressed, a look of frustration on her face. Hey, I'll be back in less than a couple of hours. You don't have to leave, I told her. Yes, I do. Just forget it, Marcus, she said with a huff as she pushed past me. I sighed, running my fingers through my hair and hoping that this call wouldn't be the one that ended our relationship. Then I checked the message to see who it was. Eldon Family Estate, requesting immediate retrieval of recently deceased. I knew the name well. Thomas Eldon was probably one of the richest men in town. Their place sat near the edge of town, near a small lake, an enormous townhouse that towered over the water like a medieval castle. Maybe he was the one that kicked the bucket finally, I thought to myself, as I gathered my things and hopped in my car. It was only a short drive to the funeral home. I tried to call the number back on the way there, but it kept going straight to their voicemail, and the automated message said that the mailbox was full. I was going to have to go in blind on this call, so I gathered as much supplies as I would need, and then loaded up the hearse. It started to snow, making the drive a bit cumbersome due to the weather, but the brightness of the flurries did make the road a little easier to see. I saw it well before I got there, just as dark and gloomy as I remember it being the last time I'd come to these woods. Not that I had ever stepped foot inside. Growing up, most kids knew better than to try and mingle with the ultra-rich family. The Eldons kept to themselves, sending their children to private schools and handling most of their business internally. Maybe that was why I had a bad feeling when I drove past the iron gate. It felt like I was trespassing or entering somewhere that I didn't belong. The cold settled down to my bones as I stepped out of my vehicle and stared at the silhouette of the mighty house. It was quiet, not another vehicle within sight. The place honestly looked deserted. As I got a little closer, I thought I smelled something. I've been around death long enough to recognize the odor, but this was different. It reminded me of a rotting barrel of fish I had come across once near the lake, wet and soggy, and filled with maggots and guts and feces. Whatever had happened inside this house, it wasn't normal. I knocked on the wide frame door, trying to get a look through the smeared windows. Most of the furniture was covered up with clothes. The rest was dusty. Did anyone even live here? Had someone called me out here just to play a prank? Just as I was considering getting in my car and driving away, I heard a noise, and the door creaked open. Only darkness invited me to step forward. Hello? My voice echoed in the empty foyer. It's Marcus Levis, from the funeral home. I got your message about half an hour ago, I said, clutching my coat and looking around the dusty and dark house. My initial assumption about the place looking abandoned felt confirmed as I looked about. There weren't any lights in the house, and most of the furniture was covered with sheets and dust. It felt haunted. I saw a tiny ordained box next to a large frame that looked like it had once held a mirror, and opened it to see a carved wooden mask inside, and a note. Wear this. What is this for? I asked, looking down at the item. No one answered, and I realized perhaps I was being watched. I became immediately uncomfortable with the fact that it fit so comfortably. Next, A clicking noise came from the far end of the hall, and I saw another door creak open. "Will I need the gurney?" I called out, but again, there was no response. I stood in the doorway of the empty and foreboding house, flustered and confused and honestly frightened. I'd heard rumors that this family was strange, but this was definitely on another level. I followed the carpet to the back of the hallway, where I saw more empty frames hanging on the wall. Each of them looked like they had once held family portraits and had been torn out. The wallpaper was peeling away and the floor felt cold. It was like entering a crypt. There were doors heading to rooms, but they were locked and looked like they hadn't been used in some time. Most of the place seemed unused. I thought I heard something behind me and jumped a little when a black cat rushed up my leg and into my arms. Its soft eyes looked up at me curiously as I glanced toward the room it had emerged from. For some reason, I was sure that someone else was there in the shadows, silently watching us. The cat then jumped from my arms and walked to the ramp that entered the den, obviously expecting me to follow. I had another look toward the shadowy room, again feeling the presence of something else there, before doing just that. I heard the sound of oxygen and a heart monitor the moment I walked in, and I realized that the small den had been fashioned as a medical suite. As soon as I saw my host, I did my best to hold back a sharp gasp. Thomas Eldon looked like he had died 15 years ago. He was hunched over in a wheelchair, wearing an old gray suit that barely clung to his misshapen body. His arms and legs were bone-thin and covered with lesions, his face shrunken and his skin pulled back almost to his skull. He was wearing an oxygen mask that covered up the wounds near his nose and mouth, most of which was covered in sores, and his right eye was missing, replaced by one made of glass that had dulled ages ago. I imagined what his days were probably like. Every breath he took was likely painful. Every movement likely filled with soreness and swelling. His head turned in a mechanical way as his good eye focused on me. To my bewilderment and trepidation, the old man was smiling. It was the most dreadful smile I have ever seen, and I thanked the stars I had the mask on to hide my revulsion. Was that why I was asked to wear it, so I wouldn't show my fear? I stood there staring at each other for what felt like an eternity. Then he spoke, his voice as coarse as a gravel road, scratchy and deep. "At last, it is time. I am ready." He wheezed and coughed, and I tried to offer him water from a nearby pitcher, but my ancient host swatted his hand away. I decided to cut to the chase and get straight to business. The sooner I left this place, the better. "I'm sorry for your loss, sir," I told him as I looked around the room. There were no windows here, no lights, save for a few dimly lit candles and what was coming from his medical equipment. It felt more like a prison cell than a comfortable home. My remark made him tremble with a wheezy laugh. "Are you? I would think a patron of death would welcome such events," Thomas responded. I clasped my hands together in front of me, hoping he would see I meant no ill will. In times like this, I know it can be difficult. What I mean by what I said is I promise I will do my best to handle this matter with the utmost of decency and respect for your deceased loved one. Again, he laughed and this time grabbed hold of his wheelchair like he was about to cough up a lung. "Is that why you think you were summoned here? Because of love?" He glared at me with his dull eyes shining against the candlelight. "I hated them. All of them. They mean nothing to me." His words made me shudder because I knew he meant them. I cleared my throat and again tried to find something in the room to focus on besides his ghastly face. I saw what looked like an ornate box behind him, probably large enough for him to sleep in. It suddenly occurred to me that there wasn't a bed anywhere in sight, so it was entirely possible he actually used the casket for rest. I kept my eyes averted to the coffin, my heart pounding faster as I tried to speed up the conversation. "You said you wished to speak with me before I obtained the body?" Thomas responded by reaching into his pocket with one of his bony hands and took out a wad of cash and passed it to me. It looked to be about $100,000 or more. "There will be double that amount if you do what I ask," he rasped. At first I was thinking this is more money than I had ever seen in my career. Then, That feeling of dread welled up inside me again. "Sir, what exactly are you asking me to do?" I didn't even finish the sentence because I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. My stomach started to twist a bit as I recalled the stench from earlier. "You must take the body tonight. No questions asked. Take it, destroy it, and don't look at it." "Those are, odd requests," I said, as I looked at the money and tried to count it up. It was all large bills and looked to be about $100,000 or more. "You must promise me, Mr. Levis," he snapped, as he pushed his bony face close to mine. His breath smelled putrid. I promise," I said, trying to compose myself. Nothing about this was making sense. Wasn't that what I was supposed to do anyway? Why did he want the body disposed of tonight? Something was horribly wrong. I was trying my best to think of a way to leave, to call Stacy, and just let the county coroner handle this. Damn my job. I just wanted out of here. Thomas coughed again, and then reached for something else. A small silver whistle. Pushing it against his blistered lips, he blew a sharp noise, and I heard another click from behind me. I thought I heard scratching on the other side of the wall, the hair on the back of my head standing up. What the fuck was happening here? I need to get a few things from my car," I said as I stepped back toward the ramp. Thomas said nothing, instead just sitting there like he was anticipating the arrival of someone or something. Cautiously, I moved toward the main entrance, the shadowy rooms becoming more unpleasant as I passed them by. The scratching against the walls became more persistent as well. I was just about to open the door to literally bolt to my car when I heard the floor creak behind me. I jumped out of my skin again when the cat skirted across the floor. And then, another figure emerged from the shadows. This one, a girl that looked no older than maybe 11. She had black hair and was wearing what looked like a hospital gown with bare feet and a few bruises on her legs. Her eyes were as green as the grass outside. She picked up her pet and stared up at me innocently. "Are you here for... She fumbled with the words, unable to finish the sentence. My mouth became dry again, a heavy knot forming in my throat as I let go of the doorknob. Yes, that's right." She pet the cat for a little while, then let it go, shuffling her feet as it rushed back to the shadows. "I don't want them to go. Please don't take them," she told me. Her eyes glistened with fresh tears. I got down on my knees and did my best to offer her comfort. "Sweetie, I'm sorry. I know this is hard," I said as I touched her cheek. She reacted with anger, pushing me away and running toward the shadows. "You can't take them. I won't let you," she screamed as she picked up something from a small coffee table and chunked it at me. I flinched and held up my hands to avoid the hurtling object, only to find a palm in front of my face, grasping the small glass fruit that she had tossed. Thomas gave the girl a stern look, pushing his wheelchair toward the table and then placing the antique back where it belonged. "Rosa, you know what must happen here," Eldon said sternly. She looked down at the ground and sniffled softly. "I don't want them to go." "And yet they must. It's for the best," Thomas insisted sternly. It was clear that he wasn't breathing well so far from his oxygen, and I wondered if the old man might collapse here in the foyer just for giving a lecture to this child. The girl said nothing, still looking at the floor. I took a step toward her, the shadowy room enveloping me, as I offered her a soft hug. "I promise I will make sure they are taken care of. I'll make sure you get to say goodbye. Okay?" I told her. She nodded and hugged me back, even giving me a soft smile. "You can help us," she whispered back to me as she passed something into my open palm. I got the impression it was meant to be a secret, so as I stood up, I covertly slipped it into my pocket to look at later when Thomas wasn't hovering over me. She ran off into the shadows past Eldon, who gave me a bizarre look like he was trying to comprehend why I had shown kindness to her. "You have a way with children, Mr. Levis," the old man observed. "No one should have to experience death so young, especially not when it's so much at one time," I told him. I felt so sorry for the little girl as she disappeared into the house, trying to imagine what her life here must be like. "Is she the only one left?" I asked him. The old man didn't bother answering. Instead, he rolled over to the door he'd mentioned earlier and took out a set of keys to unlock it, revealing a long, thin set of stairs that led to darkness below. "The body is down there?" I asked, staring into the abyss. It reeked of despair and sadness and loneliness. I thought again about leaving. Then I remembered the girl. By now, I knew something about this house was wrong. A new goal had started to ferment in my mind. Get this job done, and then find a way to get that poor girl away from here. Child Protective Services would surely feel her life here was no better than a prisoner once they saw how she was treated. With that new goal in mind, I took a step toward the basement. I was 4 steps down when I realized Thomas was watching me from the top step. "Is there any light down here?" I asked him. He muffled something under his breath and then returned a moment later when an old oil lantern. Was nothing except that medical suite run by electricity here? I took the lantern and turned toward the stairs again. They seemed to stretch forever downward. "Mr. Levis!" Eldon barked as I reached the middle of the stairs. His silhouette was eclipsed by the dim light, his misshapen body looking like a hell beast. "Remember our promise," he whispered. Then he closed the door, leaving me in the dank room alone. I'm an idiot. That's what I was thinking in that moment. This is how horror movies play out. Yet there I was, putting one foot in front of the other because I honestly didn't feel I had any other choice. I covered my mouth to try and hold back the smell as I walked to the bottom, the vast basement opening up before me once I reached the last step. The place was old, probably older than the rest of the house. Built on stone and brick, some parts of it looked like it was about to cave in. There was junk everywhere, items and memorabilia and family heirlooms shoved away from the rest of the house. All of it looked like it was covered in some kind of rot or internal fluids, the sort of which you might see from entrails that spill out when infected. And in the back of the room sat a small stone coffins, no larger than the girl I had met upstairs. That knot in my stomach twisted end over end. I kept the lantern at the level of my eyes, my heart pounding as I stepped over the mess toward it. As I got closer, I saw something near the wall. Chains and broken pieces of glass. Stains against the brick, which probably were dried blood. Everywhere I looked, there were signs of torture. I reached into my pocket and took out my cell phone, immediately trying to call 911. No reception. Of course not. Fuck me. I approached the coffin, my hands shaking as I pushed off the cover to peer inside. I don't know exactly what I was expecting to see. Certainly not an 8-year-old boy with arms crossed like he was asleep and dressed like he was going to boarding school. It was his eyes that made me want to scream. They were as black as the room around me, motionless and full of blood and tears. His still eyes stared up into my soul. I averted my gaze, expecting his lifeless body to leap and attack me at a moment's notice. The basement made a low moaning noise to heighten my anxiety, and I held the lantern closer to the boy to try and determine the cause of death. No lacerations, no injuries of any kind, nor signs of swelling that I could determine. His skin looked fresh, his hair combed perfectly. The only thing I couldn't quite pinpoint was the smell. It was still there, surrounding me on all sides. Like a ghost that lingers near the departed, it was crushing me like an anvil. What the fuck had happened to him? I took out my phone again, desperate for a signal. This house needed to be raided, the entire thing stripped from top to bottom. I was sure that there was no way these boys had died of natural causes. And I was willing to bet my life that the girl upstairs was also in danger. Since it was clear I wasn't going to be able to make a phone call, I did the next best thing. I placed the lantern against the edge of the coffin and angled my phone to get a good snapshot. Evidence of this macabre affair, I told myself as the flash went off. The light revealed I was not alone. A shadow, tall and feminine, stood at the edge of the coffins, just out of my line of sight. The moment the flash happened, I stumbled backward, recognizing her as the little girl from upstairs. I dropped my phone and found myself grasping the wall, her bland expression and cold demeanor making me feel uneasy. How did you get down here?" I asked. She held a finger to her lips and gently pointed toward the wall behind her. It looked like a dumb waiter, and she had used it to travel from above. I got back on my feet, my heart racing as I approached the coffins. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't see them like this," I said. She didn't appear to be concerned about the strange way her siblings had died. Instead, she got near the coffins, staring at them. It didn't seem like she understood the gravity of the situation. "You said I could say goodbye," she whispered. She extended her hand toward me, as if expecting me to give her something. Then I remembered she had placed something in my pocket. I reached in, a bit startled to find it was in fact a small jar that held a deadly black widow inside. Instinctively, I dropped it, and the jar rolled to her feet. She bent over, picking it up affectionately, and then unlatching the jar. I watched with morbid fascination as she took it out to her open palm and then invited the spider to crawl into her mouth. I was too mortified to stop her. She then turned her head over to the boy and placed her lips against the deceased boy's mouth. I watched silently with concern and worry as I saw the spider crawl from her mouth into the corpse, wriggling its way inside. I looked up the stairs, the empty door beckoning me to run. Then I saw something that made me pause. It was right there, amid the rest of the trash that had piled up in the basement. A family portrait, covered in that grime and mucus, but what it revealed made my blood run cold. It looked like it was taken almost 30 years ago, perhaps even 40 given the way the family dressed. Thomas was standing front and center, surrounded by 8 boys and smiling like a proud father should. Except these children looked identical to the one I just saw in the coffin. I was certain of it. All the same, they hadn't aged a day. That knot in my stomach returned as I looked at the child again, anxiety building, blood running cold, and face flushed with fear. "You said you would help," the girl snarled, her eyes flickering toward the lantern I held. "Why won't you help us?" I stumbled toward the steps, my feet moving faster than I could think. Thomas was at the top, still waiting impassively as I pushed past him to the door. I ran to my hearse, jumping and cranking the engine as fast as I could. Scrambling to find my phone, I soon realized I had left it in the basement below. "Fuck that!" I shouted, as I pressed into reverse and floored it to get away from that house. I didn't look back and didn't stop driving until I had reached Stacy's apartment. I banged on her door for about 3 minutes, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear. When she answered, the first thing I demanded was to use her phone, and I called the police. "Damn it. Why don't they answer?" I mumbled as I tried again. Stacy wrapped a robe around herself as she shut the door. "Maybe because it's almost 4 in the fucking morning. Jesus, Marcus, what the hell happened to you?" I was visibly shaking. I had a breakdown in her living room, trying to comprehend everything I had just seen and heard. Stacy had me settle on the couch and brought me warm tea and blankets, insisting I relax and tell her what happened. I tried my best, but it just brought looks of disbelief and confusion. "Marcus, you aren't making sense. You're talking in circles." "Stacy, I know what I saw in that fucking house. That old man. Damn him, I don't know what the fuck he is doing to that girl, but I know it's fucked up," I shouted. "Calm down. Don't raise your voice. I didn't say I don't believe you. It was a nightmare. The worst thing I've ever seen," I kept repeating. Somehow, she managed to get me to rest. First thing in the morning, I called the police, demanding they do a wellness check on Mr. Eldon. "There is a dead child in there, and God knows what else," I told them. Stacy managed to get me to try and resume having a normal day, being a bit more affectionate than usual. Maybe it was my broken spirit that made her feel attached. Several hours later, the police came by with puzzled expressions and questions. "You claim that you were inside Thomas Eldon's house from the hours of 3:30 to about 4:30. Is that correct?" Yes, that's right." "Did you find the body?" "He was in the basement." The police shared a look of unease toward each other. "Sir, there was nothing in the basement or anywhere else in the house, except for one corpse. That of Mr. Eldon himself." "What?" My voice cracked. We didn't come by earlier because we wanted our coroner to confirm that the death was natural causes. We'll likely be taking it to your funeral home by midday. Check again. This time they had a look of amusement on their faces. I think we would have seen something like what you described. Have a good day, the second man said, tipping his hat and exiting the apartment. Stacy pressed against me, telling me maybe to forget the whole thing, but I couldn't. I told her I had to go file some paperwork, and we would catch up after lunch. Instead, my drive took me back to the Eldon estate. The gate was still open, and the house looked just as abandoned as the night before. I parked outside and tried the door, a bit startled that it wasn't locked. "Rosa?" I called out. No one replied. I took a few steps inside and looked at all the stuff. Everything was exactly as I had seen it the night before. The door to the basement was still open, but instead to the den, calling out to Thomas or anyone that might be there. As I passed the hallway, I saw some of the doors in the hallway were now open. Unlatched by the police, no doubt. All of them looked like they were decorated for the children that had died over time, with games and gifts and toys of every sort. I stepped into the medical suite to see the body of Thomas for myself. The coroner hadn't taken it away just yet. My heart skipped a beat as I pulled back the sheet, seeing a familiar young face, the body from the basement. I stumbled away from the body, confused by the revelation. If he was the deceased, where the hell was Thomas and the girl? I heard something behind me and stifled back a scream when the county coroner came into the room. "Levice, are you, supposed to be here?" she asked. I steadied my hands and looked toward for the coffin I had seen earlier. It was gone. I found myself trying to comprehend what had happened. The coroner saw my panic, trying to get me to answer her question. I did my best. Police said the body was heading to my funeral home. Figured I would save you the trouble. She huffed as she pulled a gurney into the room. Then you should have called me. I stepped aside and watched silently as she placed the young body on the stretcher. "The police said your report identified the deceased as Mr. Eldon," I said as she covered the body up. "That's right. Why? How did you identify him?" "Blood tests, obviously. I swear, Levice, you act like I graduated yesterday." I said nothing as she pushed the body toward the stairs and paused, looking toward the children's rooms. "Where's the family?" she asked. I admitted I didn't know since that was the truth. "I guess it's better this way. Kind of weird, though. I would have expected him to be a lot older than this," she said, as she carefully guided the gurney down the stairs. When we got to the front door, she asked me a question, but I was staring down at the basement. I was sure I heard breathing. "Marcus," she snapped. "What?" "Sorry. Distracted." I said, "Did you notify the next of kin?" I told her I would, and we left together, my mind filled with unease as I followed her car to the funeral home. "Is there going to be a full autopsy?" I asked, as the coroner wheeled the body into my embalming room. "I don't see why there would be a need. It was natural causes," she said, passing me paperwork to sign. A few seconds later, I was alone with the corpse. I stood there staring at the young body for the longest time, trying to decide what to do. I focused on a scar that ran along his side near his abdomen. Then I saw the faintest of movements underneath his skin. It made my own skin crawl. Thomas's words echoed in my head. "Take the body tonight. Destroy it. Do not look at it." Why had he made such requests? What secrets did this corpse hold? I turned on my crematory furnace, steadying myself as I decided to simply end this whole thing and forget it ever happened. Maybe once this body is gone, I can wake from this nightmare. The heat from the furnace was enough to make me sweat. Flames licked the body, and I watched as it began to burn. Its skin turned black, and its eyes began to melt away, the flesh smelling rotten and putrid, reminding me of the young girl. As the body faded away, I saw something move from the chest cavity, its silhouette revealing an arachnid form as it crawled through the furnace. It was screaming the way a little infant might, angry and confused and hungry. It looked like it had the face of the girl. I was certain I heard a voice rattling in my head. "You were supposed to help us." Then the spidery monster disappeared from sight, slinking into the shadows from where it had come. I sat there, stone-faced and trembling for what felt like hours. Stacy actually came by for lunch and found me apparently wandering the funeral home like I was in a daze. I didn't want to admit what I had seen. I couldn't comprehend any of it. The next day, I was told the next of kin was going to arrive to retrieve the ashes. I didn't know what to expect, given the nightmares I had witnessed thus far. I stepped into the funeral home with the jar and saw a young man standing there. He looked about the same height as Mr. Eldon, but with a much healthier body. I offered the jar to him, trying to remain calm as we met eye to eye. I could swear one of his eyes was fake, just like the old man. "My condolences," I said. He smiled. That awful breath still smelled the same. "Death is a part of life, my boy. What ends one thing begins something new." He passed me a stack of $100 bills. "For your services, Mr. Levis." I watched him leave and stood near the steps as he got into a long car and drove toward the edge of town. I didn't stop holding my breath until I saw the car disappear behind the iron gate and then watched it close. One final thing stuck in my head. The license plates. Memento mori. Remember, you will die.